Okay, so one of the questions I'm frequently asked is, why do you live in Alabama? I live in Alabama because my family's there. There are a lot of rich cultural experiences that we share. I will tell you, part of being a fairly repressed community has resulted in this underground, almost, I hate, maybe not the best word, almost mafiosa lesbian community. I can get anything done. You know, I can call my friends and say, here's what's going on, I need this kind of doctor or this kind of lawyer, and it's done, you know, by the next day. So we have great parties. So we have a rich culture. Don't feel badly for us. We do have a lot going on. We also have the University of Alabama, the biggest employer in the state, in Birmingham, and that's where I live. My partner I've been with since 1979, so I have a rich family life. So there are a lot of good things. So I have to start with that before I tell you the story of how this exhibit was born. I've been a fine art photographer for many years, and always interested in exploring issues of identity by creating a compilation of individual portraits that create a more complex narrative of marginalized communities. I'd always been afraid to address the lesbian community, always. And that changed in 2011, as things do. We had a crisis in the community. So my friends, we all thought we had it made, right? We were living don't ask, don't tell, having our parties, taking care of each other. Everything was great until it wasn't. I had a set of friends who had been together 20 years. They had mama living with them. They were taking care of one of the women's elderly parents. One of them got breast cancer. And Kathy was dying in the hospital in hospice. And so somebody had to take care of mom. The brother who had not been involved in their lives came and moved in temporarily to care for mom. He also changed all the locks and locked Kay out of their home. And so when Kathy died, Kathy didn't know about this, but when Kathy died, Kay had to get the police to let her in to get a change of clothes to go to the funeral and the computer to pay their bills. Well, what was even worse is when we went to the funeral, they had some really good straight friends that they traveled with who said they did not know that they were gay or that they were a couple. And they didn't know that gay people could be treated that way in Alabama. And so this was really a crisis, identity crisis for our community, because it became clear that really things weren't okay, and that we had some responsibility by living in the closet. We were allowing this to go on. So I knew I wanted to put a face in the community, but I wasn't really quite sure how. I started having coffee with a couple of friends that I'd collaborated with on other social issues in the past. And they were gay, and we would sit and talk about this, and we kept coming back to who in the world would let us take their photograph and put it on the wall, and who would let us put it on the wall. So that went on for a couple of months, and then I, as a result of that, came up with a concept where people might feel safe. And the concept was you could have your back to the camera or you could face the camera. You could touch or not touch, wear what you want. Include your children if you have them, but I wanted to give people complete control, and I wanted them to feel safe. In the past, my portraits were always created in the natural environment, and that was an important part of my art. But in this case, for the first time, I decided to wipe out the background and leave no trace. Because honestly, there were still recent death threats for people for trying to do advocacy work in Birmingham. So we did not know. And so for safety reasons, that's what I did. I had a really hard time when I emailed my friends and called my friends. People did not call me back. And I came up with 5 families who were willing to do it, some with their backs to the camera, some facing. And I went to the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and I said, look, I have no idea whether you'd be willing to take this risk, but I think we need to do this. And I showed them the portraits. And they had a relationship with me because I'd done social documentary work with them in the past. And they said, well, we trust you, and this is the Birmingham community, and we've been talking about this for a couple years, so this is the right project. So they took it on. And that was key, because once we had them on board, I was able to go to the Birmingham Museum of Art and the Southern Poverty Law Center and say, I need your help. I need you to endorse this and make this, to legitimize this. That happened immediately. So then, within a month, I had more people than I could photograph because, people heard what was going to happen. This is really going to happen. It's not going to be some cheesy thing in a bar somewhere. This is really going to make a difference. The last person, and so then I focused on diversity, and I was able to say, I want more African Americans, I want some more people that are older, I want some more families, and so we were able to, I say we because my friends from the coffee shop were with me the whole way on this, trying to help recruit, participants, getting the releases, everything that goes with it. So we came up with that. The last person that I signed up was a prominent attorney, and this is an important part of the story. Ann Huckstep is her name. She'd been in the closet, highly successful, retirement age, which is key, because a lot of the people that made this happen had retirement accounts and could step out and say, I don't care, you can't hurt me anymore. She was one. And so what she did is she wrote a very large check, a $25,000 check. And she said, I want this to be transformational. I want you to have enough money to have beautiful frames, to have a catalog, and most importantly, we hired a PR firm. She went not to her gay friends, she went to her straight friends in the business community. She went to visit people from the Rotary Club and said, you've worked with me for 30 years, 35 years. I'm coming out to you. I'm telling you that I'm a lesbian and that I believe in this and that it matters, and I've written a personal check. And I want you to write a personal check. And you're CEO of Health South, I want money from them too. And so she did it. She was very successful, and pulled together the funds to be able to do this in a way that honored and respected the subject matter. So that's the background of how we got to 2012. I will say, when we first started this, and the gay men in Birmingham had a little bit of visibility because of the 80s and the HIV epidemic, but women were completely invisible. So this was the first time we stepped up as a group, and said, we're going to spend our money and we're going to spend our political clout and do something, And so we were putting a face on our community. And it wasn't just my photographs, it was the whole team, people making that happen. So 2012 goes up on the wall. We have the largest opening reception that's ever been held at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. People were breaking the fire codes. People are pushing to get in. It was amazing. There were congressmen there. There were felons. There was everything in between. Your doctor, your lawyer, everybody. And people were walking around and saying, I can't believe, that this is Birmingham, Alabama, and this is happening. It was very exciting for everybody. 17,000 visitors came through in a 2-month period. People were really ready to have this conversation. There was also a lot of backlash. I had problems getting the poster printed because this image was on the poster, and the only guy who could use the press refused to do it because it conflicted with his religious beliefs. So they literally sent somebody in at night and had the posters made. The same people made our catalog, and I will tell you that there aren't many. I would have a stack out here for people to get, but we're low because we can't get it reprinted because they decided that it conflicted with their Christian values. So we had that kind of thing. But we also had really much more constructive things. I had an African-American city councilwoman who publicly said she was tired of groups, other minority groups, co-opting the civil rights movement. But it was great. I didn't say anything, but an African-American woman who was the child of a civil rights attorney, an African-American civil rights attorney who'd made great strides in the 60s, who was president of the board of directors for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, publicly said, civil rights are for everybody. And they went back and forth publicly in the press. And it was fantastic. And then the woman who originally made the remarks said, well, I think my remarks were taken out of context. There was also a Facebook campaign to take the poster down. We had a poster with this image on it that was 2 stories tall, hanging outside. And it was an in-your-face move. Yes. And I will tell you that when I got there to walk in, the first time I saw it, I looked at my wife and said, oh my God, what have we done? But there was a Facebook campaign to take it down. It was handled. It never happened. It was all good. So So art as advocacy in our community was raging. I'm going to walk through and tell you some of the stories, and then I'll tell you some more about the outcomes that we've had since then.
We're going to ask everyone if you could come into this side of the gallery.
So I've been asked to tell some of the individual stories, and I'd like for this to be informal. So if I describe a family, you have questions, just speak up. Okay? All right, so this couple right here, this was taken 2 weeks after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repelled. But the soldier said that her commanding officer had called the group in to announce Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repelled, and said, it's a sad day for the military, and I don't want homosexuals in my army. And so she was up for promotion, and so she really literally couldn't face the camera, even though she supposedly had the legal protections. So that's their story. This one right here is Burnett and Darlene. And Burnett, basically, and I'm going to misquote her, but basically what she said is, I'm large, I'm black, and I'm a lesbian. Get over it. Enough. You know? Enough. I've been marginalized enough in my life. And that's her. This is actually her daughter, who's also a lesbian, Deidre. Deidre was involved in a bitter custody battle for her son. She initially lost custody because when she divorced her husband, he got custody because she was a lesbian. So then the husband's wife abused the kid. Lots of physical evidence. HRC took the kid away and gave the child back to Deidre. So Deidre struggled for probably 3 years in the courts. She had a judge who opened the session with a prayer and looked at her and said, I don't believe in your lifestyle, and I believe in corporal punishment. Now, in the end, she ended up getting transferred to a different judge, and I'm happy to tell you that she now has custody, full custody of her child. But those are their stories. This young woman was doing a residency at the University of Alabama, a specialty residency, and she was worried she wouldn't get hired full-time, so she was concerned about facing the camera. That was at the University of Alabama, which is a huge medical center, a world-class medical center. I will tell you that we met with the president when this project started to ask for funds, and she was great. She said, yes, I'll write you a check, and you can use our logo for the Office of Diversity on your poster. The night before the poster went to press, the Office of Diversity pulled it. So there is a non-discrimination policy, but these are the kinds of complex issues that people deal with that make it a little harder to be out and be proud than what one might think. And I will say that it always comes down to child custody and income, you know, the ability to provide for your family. This couple, good friends of ours, they look like soccer moms. Beth, they both have stories about religion, because we are in the Bible Belt. And so Beth on the right belonged to a church, and she confessed to one of her parishioners, fellow parishioners that she thought was a friend, that she thought she might be a lesbian. And basically she got a letter from the minister and was kicked out of the church for that. And then Terry's brother was a minister in a conservative church, and she was ambushed. She was in the church one day, and they pulled her up front and did an exorcism and said, demons be out. So there are lots of churches now that are welcoming, particularly in the last 3 years, so I don't want you to think all churches are that way, but that's where some of our women come from, and those are the lives they've had.
This is 2010-11?
These photographs were all taken in 2011. Yeah, 2011. And then moving over here, this is Marge. And Marge is a minister who actually had death threats when she tried to do interfaith panel discussions about LGBTQ rights in Birmingham, maybe 10 years ago, maybe not that long. But she's bold, and she's facing the camera, and she's very defiant. Now her partner, Shirley, still has her back to the camera. She's a part-time social worker, and she was worried she'd make her patients uncomfortable. So that's where she was coming from. This is one of the most important images in the collection. This family represents the most frequently occurring gay family in America. African American women raising kids from previous heterosexual relationships in poverty in the South. They don't have the money to fight for their jobs. They can't hire a lawyer. They don't have the money to hire an attorney if the birth father wants these kids. So I'm very protective of this family, and there's another one as well. And I thought it was really important to include them in the collection. So let's see. Kate and Claire, these were the kids that blew me away because, I forgot to mention, part of my concept was I wanted a range of emotions. So I asked people I just drew a line and said, stand around there. And you can wear what you want, you can touch or not touch, bring your kids if you want, just be comfortable, be yourself. And anyway, but part of it also was I had 3 words that I said in series, and I photographed their response to the words, and it was lesbian, pride, and prejudice. So I had some older women when I said lesbian who said, I still can't say that word in public. You know, I mean, I'm just afraid to say that in public. These kids said, lesbian, I'm a queer. You know, I mean, they totally introduced me to this new non-binary way of thinking about sexual identity and gender identity that honestly, in 2011, I hadn't heard it. You know, we were pretty insulated. About Pride and Prejudice, I mean, there were tears from some of the older lesbians who really had some stories. And these kids were like, what are you talking about? Of course, they were just getting out of college, so they really didn't know. She works for Merrill Lynch, so I'd like to also revisit with her how that's going. But anyway, Mary and Polly, this is a story that is pretty interesting. At the reception, Polly was spotted by a colleague, and the colleague said, Polly, I loved y'all's picture. And she said, that wasn't me. That's not me. And she said later, I don't know why I said that, but I did. I will tell you, I just got their wedding invitation in the mail. They're getting married. They're out. Yeah. This is an important image for me. This is my best friend since college and her partner of many, many, many years. She gave birth to all 3 of the children. And there's this thing that goes on if you're privileged in Alabama where you can take your kids to another southern state and adopt them. And so then you have 2 parents with legal rights to protect their children. But it's only the privileged because it's expensive and you have to travel. But there is an underground adoption system that privileged women in Alabama have worked out to go and get their children adopted by each other. So that's one of the things that represents to me. And of course, their backs to the camera because one's a physician, owns a business where she has to deal with the most conservative white guys in Alabama, which is pretty, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're very conservative and start their meetings with a prayer, and she just is afraid. They're affluent, but they send their kids to private school, and they don't want that to end, you know, and it would if they weren't able to make a living. This family right here, I know it's very hard for you to see, but I do need to say something about it. This is the African American family, the 3 kids with Joette and Tony. And Tony went to prison for 5 years, and Joette, who had no biological connection to the children and no legal parental rights, took care of the kids during the 5 years. So she dealt with all kinds of issues, and can you imagine, no rights at all in terms of trying to protect the kids and the family and hold it together. But she did. So I mean, I always think of, this is really a family. Let's see, this one. This one's important because the woman on the right was fired from her job because of intimations that she was gay. It all started with a Georgia O'Keeffe poster on the wall. And it went down from there, yes. So, and that was in a small town, and this was many years ago, but she was afraid for that reason. Now, I will tell you, and this person right here, they just got married on the courthouse lawn the first day that was legal. They were married. So they're completely turned around, facing the camera. She works for the Board of Education in Montgomery at the state level, and is not afraid. So let's see what else we have here. This family also, their son was adopted when he was weeks old. They did the underground adoption in the southern state I won't mention, because the judge, and here's what happens. There's a judge and an attorney that have things set up 3 days a year. They have Gay Day, and they bring people in from all over the country and do the adoptions. Isn't that cool? Yeah. This is a family that, Beth actually is one of the lesbians that cried when I said prejudice. And she had been out for many, many years, but she also had had a lot of experience of oppression because of that. And the final couple here, I think this is it. Yeah. Tessa on the left actually lives in New York. And she was born and raised in Birmingham, and she's a friend of ours. And when she heard about the project, she said, "Can I please come home and be a part of this? Because it really matters to me. I'm living in New York because I don't feel safe in my hometown, but I want to come stand up for this." So that's the, those are the stories in a nutshell. I will tell you that my wife, Jean, hold your hand up, has a great accent, and she knows the stories too, and she can tell, if you have any questions, she's good about answering them. What has happened since then is that the show traveled. It went to West Hollywood Library. It went to the African American Museum in Dallas. Merrill Lynch did a pop-up show for Art Basel this year. And now it's here. So it's important to us that it move around. You probably understand in Florida, in a way that maybe some other states don't, how challenging states' rights are going to be for us if we don't get the Supreme Court ruling that we need. So I think it's important for the country that's moved on to see and hear the stories and to have a face in our community. So, and we're also working on a documentary. I'm working on a documentary with some people, some filmmakers, that is called State and Union. And it's basically what's happening with lesbian families who live in Alabama the year between the DOMA decision and whatever happens in June. You know, what is it like when everything else has moved on in California, and what have we been going through? So, so that's what I'm working on now. If you want to, be informed and keep up with what we're doing, let me know. Give me your card, and I'll put you on the mailing list. But it's been, I will say, it's been amazing. This exhibit brought it was a mass coming out of the lesbian community in Birmingham, Alabama, and an empowerment. And we have one openly gay state legislator who's a lesbian, Patricia Todd. Some of you may have heard of her. And so we're really proud of that and proud of what's happened. So thank you for your attention.